The chill of a late autumn evening in West Philadelphia had already settled, seeping into the bones of the city. Dominique Taylor, her movements a well-practiced ballet of efficiency, wiped down the counter of Rosetta's diner, the clatter of plates and the murmur of conversation having long since faded. The brass bell, a relic that had announced patrons for generations, jingled with a sharp, unexpected urgency at 10:50 p.m., a mere 10 minutes before closing. She should have said, "Kitchen's closed," her training dictating adherence to the rules, but the sight of him stopped her. A boy, no older than 10, stumbled in, drenched by the relentless rain, his designer clothes torn, a bruise already darkening on his delicate wrist. His eyes, weighed with a terror that spoke of more than just the storm, met hers. "What can I get you, sweetie?" The words were out before she could even think. It was an instinct, a flicker of human warmth against the encroaching coldness of the night and of her own increasingly harsh reality. The boy, Jackson, counted crumpled bills on the counter. $5.73, a meager sum. "Is that enough for anything?" he whispered, his voice barely audible above the drumming rain. Dominique glanced at the empty manager's office. Stan, the current owner and Rosetta's grandson, was likely immersed in his ledgers, or perhaps in conversation with one of the corporate investors he was so eager to impress. She made a split-second decision, a defiance of the rule-book born of pure empathy. "Today's special," she announced, her voice brighter than she felt. "Grilled cheese deluxe with fries and a shake. $5 even." Relief, raw and overwhelming, washed over his face as he slid the money forward. Unseen by anyone, Dominique rang up a water cup, pulling a crisp $5 bill from her meager tip jar. A small sacrifice, she thought, for a moment of peace for a clearly troubled child. "I'm Jackson," he whispered as she served him, his eyes never leaving the plate. "Thank you for not making me leave." He devoured the food with a desperate hunger that suggested days, not hours, since his last meal. She slipped him a slice of sweet potato pie, her grandmother Rosetta's legendary recipe, a final indulgent customer violation of the night. She believed it was her last, an act of simple compassion. Then a sudden sweep of headlights across the windows, stark against the darkness. A midnight black Bentley screeched to the curb, its powerful engine a jarring counterpoint to the quiet diner. "Is there another exit?" Jackson's voice cracked with raw panic. Too late. The door flew open. A man, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his custom shoes squeaking across the linoleum, entered. His gaze, cold and precise, surveyed the diner with the calculated efficiency of a predator. "Jackson Harrington," he clipped, his voice British, devoid of warmth. "Your father is beside himself." Jackson, clinging to Dominique's arm, whispered, "Please don't make me go with him." At that moment, Stan emerged from his office, his face a mask of fury at the scene unfolding. "Dominique, did you serve after closing and give away food?" The British man's eyebrow arched with sudden interest, his gaze traveling from Dominique's worn sneakers to her name tag, lingering there with a calculating intensity that made her skin crawl. "You fed him?" One simple meal, a hungry child. How could Dominique possibly know it would change everything? The next morning, Stan's voice echoed through Rosetta's, devoid of sympathy. 2 weeks probation, and you're covering the missing $5.73. Dominique nodded silently, refusing to defend herself. The diner's early light illuminated decades of history in the framed photographs on the walls, a visual testament to a black-owned business, fighting to survive in West Philadelphia's rapidly gentrifying Parkside neighborhood. "You're lucky I don't fire you outright," Stan continued, his mustache twitching with irritation. The original Rosetta, his grandmother, had built this diner on a philosophy of community first, profit second. Stan, however, had different priorities, particularly since corporate investors had backed his expansion plans, eyeing the lucrative urban renewal market. His grandmother's values were, to him, an archaic sentimentality. "Third violation this month," he muttered, though they both knew the previous infractions were fabricated, mysteriously disappearing customer receipts, complaints from patrons no one remembered serving. Her co-worker, Aisha, a fellow waitress navigating the same discriminatory landscape, shot her a sympathetic glance. They both recognized the pattern. The only two black waitresses consistently assigned the worst sections, scrutinized for infractions their white colleagues committed without consequence. Outside, the relentless march of progress continued, a construction crew demolishing another historic row house to make way for luxury condominiums. "Parkside Renaissance," the glossy brochures proclaimed, promising a vibrant future. Locals, however, called it something else entirely: displacement. 6 blocks away, Dominique unlocked 3 separate deadbolts on her apartment door, a security ritual born of necessity. The building superintendent had promised to fix the heating for months, a promise as hollow as the developer's brochures. She placed an aluminum pot beneath a fresh ceiling leak before changing into her nursing assistant uniform for her second job, another attempt to outrun the rising tide of bills. Her phone buzzed. The nursing home administrator. "Taylor, we're overstaffed today. Stay home." Translation: budget cuts, yet again, disproportionately impacting the most vulnerable employees. Half a shift's wages vanished. Another blow. Dominique closed her eyes, recalculating. Rent due in 9 days. Mom's medication refill tomorrow. Her culinary school application fee deadline next week. She ran her fingers across the one true luxury in her possession, a handcrafted Japanese santoku knife, a gift from Chef Lauren from her brief apprenticeship. "You have the hands of a chef," he'd said, his words a haunting reminder of a dream deferred. "Don't waste them." The $900 knife, a symbol of culinary excellence and a world away from her current struggles, represented everything she couldn't quite reach. Her phone chimed again, a text from her mother. "Lab results back. Doctor wants to try new treatment. Insurance denied. $2,300. Dominique's shoulders slumped. Her mother had raised her alone after her father was incarcerated for a crime he didn't commit, working 3 jobs until lupus, a cruel and relentless adversary, forced her into early retirement. Now, Dominique carried that same weight, a generational burden of struggle and resilience. Later that day at Rosetta's, Dominique served a table of real estate developers, their loud pronouncements about urban renewal grating on her nerves as they left insultingly small tips. Among them sat Maxwell Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Development Group, the driving force behind most of Parkside's gentrification. "The diner property is the key," Reynolds was saying, his voice a smug hum. "Once we acquire it, we control the entire block." Dominique nearly dropped her coffee pot. Stan had promised the staff Rosetta's wasn't selling, a lie she now recognized. "Problem is," another developer chimed in, "some stubborn tenants in those old apartments behind the diner. Mostly Section 8, but they're organized." Reynolds smirked, a cruel glint in his eye. "Nothing a few building code violations can't fix, or maybe a nice water main issue. They'll be gone by spring. Dominique lived in those exact apartments. Her mother, too. The cold calculation of their words, dissecting human lives as if they were mere line items on a balance sheet, sickened her. This wasn't just about property. It was about power, control, and the deliberate dismantling of established communities for profit. After her shift, Dominique found a notice taped to her apartment door. Notice of inspection. Water system upgrades require access to all units. Service interruptions expected. The Reynolds Development Group logo gleamed ominously at the bottom of the page. The same day, an email arrived from the Culinary Institute. Due to high demand, application fees have increased to $150. Dominique had saved exactly $75. That night, she soaked her swollen feet in Epsom salts, the soothing warmth a small comfort, while studying old cookbooks by flashlight, power conserved to save on electricity. The only splash of color on her apartment walls was a framed photograph of Rosetta herself from 1968, standing proudly before the newly opened diner. Her grandmother had sewn the original diner uniforms on the vintage Singer sewing machine. Dominique now kept beside her bed, her second prized possession. She was failing to hold together what generations before her had built. The thought kept her awake long after her feet stopped aching, a gnawing fear that she was losing the battle, not just for herself, but for a legacy. 3 days after the Jackson incident, Dominique arrived at Rosetta's to find her shifts cut in half. Stan claimed budget adjustments, but Aisha's schedule remained untouched. The blatant discrimination, a bitter pill to swallow. The morning rush hit hard, with Dominique covering twice her usual tables, a relentless tide of orders. "Order up!" The cook slapped the bell. 3 plates balanced precariously up her arm. Dominique navigated the crowded diner. A customer, later insisting it was accidental, stuck out his foot, sending her crashing to the floor. Plates shattered, coffee splashed across her uniform. "That's coming out of your pay," Stan called without looking up from his phone, his callousness a deliberate act of humiliation. By noon, her tips barely covered the broken dishes. Dominique retreated to the bathroom, pressing damp paper towels against her eyes, the sting of defeat mixing with the scalding coffee. When she emerged, a familiar black Bentley idled outside the diner. The British man, Jackson's handler, strode in, scanning each booth with military precision, his gaze locking onto Dominique. A word. His business card read, "Victor Chambers, Chief of Security, Harrington Global Industries." The name resonated with the developer's casual talk of acquisition. Harrington was a behemoth, a global player in everything from finance to real estate, its reach extending far beyond West Philadelphia. "Mr. Harrington wishes to thank you for your kindness to his son," Chambers stated, his voice a monotone, devoid of warmth. He extended an envelope. "This should cover any inconvenience." Inside, 5 crisp $100 bills, more money than she'd make all week at both jobs. "I didn't help Jackson for money," Dominique said, attempting to return the envelope, her dignity a fragile shield. "Nevertheless," Chambers pressed it back to her, "Jackson is troubled since his mother's passing. Running away has become a habit. Mr. Harrington appreciates your assistance." The brusque dismissal of Jackson's distress, the casual mention of his mother's death, felt chilling. "Is Jackson okay?" I saw bruises. Chambers' expression hardened, a flicker of something dangerous in his eyes. "The boy is clumsy. Good day, Miss Taylor." After he left, Dominique discovered another item in the envelope, a business card for Harrington Global Industries, with an address in Center City's most exclusive high-rise, a bastion of corporate power. The back bore handwritten words in a child's cheerful script. "Thank you for the pie. J double quote. A small human touch in a world of cold corporate transactions. That evening, her mother called. The new treatment required a $500 deposit by Friday. The money from Chambers solved one immediate problem, but raised disturbing questions about Jackson's welfare and the true cost of her kindness. The following morning, Reynolds Development Group representatives canvassed the apartment building, offering generous relocation packages to vacate within 30 days. Most offers were insultingly low, a predatory tactic common in gentrifying neighborhoods where residents, particularly those in affordable housing, were seen as obstacles rather than citizens. Elderly residents who'd lived there for decades were given the worst terms, their deep roots treated as liabilities. Dominique organized an emergency tenant meeting in the building's laundry room, a small space crowded with 20 anxious neighbors. She explained what she'd overheard at the diner. A community organizer named Marcus, a man whose quiet intensity belied a fierce dedication to justice, took names for a formal complaint. "They're creating utility emergencies to force us out," Marcus explained, his voice calm but resolute. "It's illegal, but they're banking on us not having the resources to fight back." This was a common playbook in urban development, weaponizing bureaucracy and legal loopholes against communities. Returning to her apartment, Dominique found her door unlocked. Nothing seemed missing, but everything felt disturbed. The photograph of Rosetta was slightly askew. Her culinary school application, a symbol of her dreams, had been moved from the table to the counter, a subtle invasion. Her phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. "Mind your business. Service workers should serve, not eavesdrop." Cold fear spread through her chest. Someone had been watching her, listening. This wasn't just about gentrification anymore. It was personal. At work the next day, Reynolds himself sat in her section with Stan, deep in conversation. They fell silent when she approached, their abrupt pause a clear signal of their conspiratorial dialogue. Reynolds's soul never reached his eyes. "The famous sweet potato pie, please," he ordered. "I hear it's unforgettable." How could he know about the pie she'd given Jackson, an act of private kindness? The answer landed with a sickening thump. After her shift, Stan called her into his office. Customer complained about hair in their food. "Your section." "That's impossible." She was meticulous. "I've written you up." One more incident means termination. Outside the diner, Chambers leaned against the Bentley, watching. He'd been there all afternoon, a silent, menacing sentinel. When their eyes met, he made a show of checking his watch, waiting her out. He was, she realized, a corporate enforcer, a specialist in problem-solving in the shadows. That night, Dominique found water pouring from her ceiling. The apartment above hers, suddenly vacant, had mysteriously burst pipes. Emergency maintenance was unavailable until morning. She saved what possessions she could, including her grandmother's sewing machine, another tangible link to her heritage. The water destroyed her culinary school application and ruined her nursing uniform, systematically dismantling her avenues of escape. At dawn, a building inspector, surprisingly prompt, declared her apartment uninhabitable. The management company offered temporary housing at double her current rent, a cynical ploy to force her out. Her mother's treatment deposit was due tomorrow, leaving Dominique no financial cushion, only hard choices. When she arrived at the nursing home for her shift, security stopped her. "You're not on today's approved staff list." Her supervisor seemed genuinely confused. "Your background check suddenly flagged an issue. Corporate says we can't schedule you until it's cleared." Dominique's hands trembled. both income sources cut in the same week. This wasn't coincidence. It was a coordinated attack. She returned to Rosetta's, desperate for additional shifts, a lifeline she knew was rapidly receding. Stan was meeting with a corporate investor, a sharply dressed woman she'd never seen before. Through the office window, Dominique recognized documents bearing the Harrington Global Industries logo. The bell above the door jingled. Jackson entered alone, hoodie pulled low, his small figure radiating a sense of desperation. He slipped into a back booth, eyes darting nervously to the windows. "You shouldn't be here," Dominique whispered, approaching his table. "They're looking for you. They're always looking for me," he replied, his voice small but resolute. "I needed to warn you. My father doesn't know what Victor does to make problems disappear." Before Jackson could explain further, Stan shouted across the diner, "Taylor, my office, now!" When she turned back, Jackson was gone. In his place lay a small, wrapped package and a handwritten note. Evidence. "Don't trust anyone from Harrington Industries, not even my father." Stan terminated her employment on the spot. "Corporate restructuring," he claimed, though they both knew the truth. As she left Rosetta's, perhaps for the last time, she unwrapped Jackson's package in the alley. Inside, a leather-bound journal and a vintage platinum Mont Blanc fountain pen engraved with the Harrington crest, the second luxury item to enter her life under strange circumstances, another piece of a puzzle she was still piecing together. The journal contained entries in a tight, controlled handwriting, Chambers' daily reports to Ellis Harrington, detailing methods of removing obstacles. Many pages listed Dominique's name, her very existence an inconvenience to be managed. The rain pounded mercilessly as Dominique huddled beneath the bus shelter, her few salvaged possessions in 2 plastic bags beside her. Her mother had taken her in, but the tiny 1-bedroom apartment already strained under medical equipment and prescriptions. 2 adults there would only trigger another occupancy violation from Reynolds' inspectors, another tool of corporate harassment. Flipping through Chambers' journal revealed a disturbing pattern. Ellis Harrington, billionaire CEO, rarely saw his son. Chambers handled the Jackson situation, reporting only sanitized versions of events. The most troubling entries detailed behavior correction sessions after Jackson's escape attempts, a euphemism for abuse. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Emergency tenant meeting. Evidence of deliberate water damage. Lawyer coming." Dominique hesitated. Getting involved further could make things worse, but the journal in her hands proved the connection between Reynolds Development and Harrington Industries, a powerful partnership to acquire entire blocks of Parkside. Rosetta's diner was the centerpiece, its location a strategic asset. The vintage Mont Blanc pen felt heavy in her pocket. Worth at least $2,000, it represented more than a month's rent. She could sell it, pay her mother's treatment deposit, and disappear. Start over somewhere. Reynolds and Chambers couldn't find her. The number 42 bus wheezed to a stop, Center City route, straight to Harrington Tower, the address on the business card Jackson had given her. "You getting on?" the driver asked. Dominique made her decision. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about Jackson, her mother, and a community under siege. 20 minutes later, she stood before the gleaming glass tower, its cold facade reflecting the grey sky. Security guards eyed her suspiciously as rain dripped from her clothes onto the polished marble floor. "I need to see Ellis Harrington," she said at the reception desk. "About his son." The receptionist's professional smile never wavered, a mask of corporate indifference. Mr. Harrington doesn't take unscheduled appointments. Tell him it's about Jackson's safety. Security will escort you out, the receptionist replied, reaching for the phone. Dominique placed the Mont Blanc pen on the counter. This belongs to Mr. Harrington. His son asked me to return it personally. The receptionist froze, recognizing the pen immediately. Its value and provenance spoke a language the corporate world understood. Minutes later, Dominique found herself in a private elevator, ascending to the penthouse offices. The executive floor hummed with quiet efficiency, a realm of power and unspoken influence. A silver-haired woman approached. Patricia Winters, according to her introduction, Chief of Staff. Mr. Harrington is unavailable, but as his Chief of Staff, I handle all family matters. This is for Mr. Harrington only, Dominique insisted, clutching the journal. It concerns his son's welfare. I assure you, Jackson is perfectly safe at his boarding school in Connecticut. Patricia's smile mirrored the receptionist's, practiced, empty. Then why did I serve him dinner in West Philadelphia 3 days ago? The mask slipped. Patricia steered Dominique into a conference room, her voice lowered, a subtle shift in her polished demeanor. Mr. Harrington is managing a global acquisition today. These disruptions are exactly why Jackson requires structure. His emotional outbursts since his mother's death. The bruises on his wrists weren't emotional outbursts, Dominique interrupted, her voice firm. And he's terrified of your security, Chief. Patricia's phone buzzed. Her expression changed as she read the message. Wait here, she ordered, leaving Dominique alone in the vast conference room overlooking the city. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Dominique could see Parkside in the distance, the neighborhood her grandmother had helped build, now threatened by the very company whose headquarters she sat in. On the conference table, architectural models displayed the Parkside Renaissance project, her home replaced by luxury condominiums. The door opened. Patricia returned with a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, salt-and-pepper hair, framing a face that often graced Philadelphia business magazine covers. Clayton Bishop, he introduced himself, General Counsel for Harrington Industries. Not Ellis Harrington himself, but a lawyer. They were managing her like a potential liability, a minor crisis to be contained. I have evidence that your security chief is abusing Jackson, Dominique stated firmly, her fear hardening into resolve, and conspiring with Reynolds Development to illegally force tenants from their homes in Parkside. Bishop's expression remained neutral, a testament to years of legal poker. Serious accusations require serious evidence, Miss Taylor. She placed the journal on the table. Bishop examined it briefly, his face unreadable, betraying no emotion. I'll ensure Mr. Harrington receives this personally, he finally said. Now, regarding your current situation, I understand you're experiencing housing difficulties and employment challenges. Harrington Industries would like to offer assistance. The bribe came wrapped in corporate language, insidious in its subtlety. Relocation compensation, a confidentiality agreement, a career opportunity in another city. The subtext was clear. Take the money, disappear, forget Jackson. I don't want your money, Dominique said, her voice unwavering. I want to speak directly to Ellis Harrington about his son. Bishop's smile tightened, a thin, almost invisible line. Mr. Harrington values his privacy, especially regarding family matters. Now, our offer is generous but time-sensitive. Behind him, Patricia made a subtle gesture to the security guard positioned outside the glass door. I need to use the restroom, Dominique said suddenly, gathering her things, a sudden spark of an idea igniting within her. Patricia pointed down the hall. Second door on the left. Security will escort you. In the immaculate bathroom, Dominique quickly photographed key pages of the journal with her phone, a desperate measure. As she washed her hands, a stall door opened. A slender black woman in an impeccable suit emerged, gold-rimmed glasses framing observant eyes. "Quite a performance out there," the woman remarked, applying lipstick in the mirror, her tone curious rather than hostile. Dominique tensed. "Excuse me." Clayton Bishop has used that same generous but time-sensitive line since law school. She extended a business card. "Zoe Michaels, Executive VP of Operations." The card featured the same Harrington Industries logo, but unlike the others, this one felt authentic, less a symbol of oppression, more a badge of genuine authority. "I just want to help Jackson," Dominique said cautiously, a glimmer of hope. "I've worked with Ellis Harrington for 15 years, Zoe replied. "If what you're saying about his son is true, he would want to know. Ellis is in Hong Kong until tomorrow, and he's unaware of Chambers' methods. The company operates differently when he's away. Why should I trust you?" "You shouldn't trust no one here." Zoe checked her watch, a sense of urgency in her movements. "They've already called Chambers. He's on his way up. If you have proof, now isn't the time." Zoe scribbled something on her card. "My personal number. Ellis lands at 11 p.m. tomorrow. Call me after." She straightened her blazer. "Now, I suggest you leave through the service elevator, third-floor employee cafeteria. Your bathroom visit has become suspiciously long." Minutes later, Dominique slipped through the service entrance onto a side street just as Chambers' Bentley pulled up to the main entrance. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Smart move, Z." A small, vital ally in an imposing fortress. That evening, she joined the tenant meeting in Marcus's apartment, the small space crowded with 20 neighbors, as a housing attorney laid out their options. The evidence Dominique provided, photos of deliberate water damage, the chilling details of Chambers' journal, strengthened their case significantly. "We can file for an emergency injunction," the attorney explained, "but these companies have deep pockets and deeper political connections. It will be a fight." As the meeting concluded, Dominique noticed a familiar face, an elderly man who worked in Rosetta's kitchen, a quiet fixture. He approached slowly. "Miss Dominique, a boy came to the diner looking for you today." Left this. He handed her a napkin with an address scrolled in the same careful handwriting, Fairmont Park Boathouse, noon tomorrow. Important. J. The pieces were connecting, forming a mosaic of conspiracy and vulnerability. Jackson, the journal, Zoe's warning, Ellis Harrington's return. Everything converging in the next 24 hours. Dominique's simple act of kindness had pulled her into something far bigger than a hungry child and a free meal. It had entangled her in a web of corporate malfeasance and personal betrayal. That night, her mother's condition worsened, the need for the specialized treatment now urgent. Without insurance approval, the $2,300 deposit stood between her mother and relief, a cruel barrier. The Mont Blanc pen sat on the nightstand, a possible solution and a certain betrayal of Jackson's trust. Sometimes kindness requires courage more than sacrifice, her grandmother had always said. Dominique would need both to survive what was coming. Noon sunlight dappled the historic Fairmont Park boathouse as Dominique approached cautiously. The park offered neutral ground, public enough for safety, secluded enough for privacy. She'd taken precautions, asking Marcus to wait nearby, a silent guardian. Jackson sat alone on a bench, feeding ducks with torn bread pieces, a stark contrast to the opulence of his home. No sign of Chambers or other Harrington security. The boy looked smaller in daylight, shoulders hunched beneath his designer hoodie. "You came," he said, relief flooding his face. "Your note said it was important." Dominique sat beside him, scanning for surveillance, an instinct she was quickly developing. "Dad's coming home tonight." Victor doesn't know. Jackson's voice dropped to a whisper, laden with a child's profound hurt. "He tells Dad I'm at boarding school, but I've been locked in the penthouse for weeks." Why would Chambers lie about that? "Because Dad wanted me in regular school after Mom died." Victor convinced him I was unstable, needed specialized care. Jackson's fingers made bitter air quotes, a clear sign of how deeply he understood the manipulation. But really, Victor handles Dad's problem people. "I heard him talking about you." Dominique's stomach tightened. "Me?" "He told Reynolds you were interfering with their development plan. Said you had unexpected connections and needed to be neutralized." A jogger passed too slowly, eyes lingering. Jackson tensed. "We should move." They walked deeper into the park, Jackson explaining between breaths. "Victor needs that diner property. Something about access to underground utility tunnels for the whole development. Dad signed off on the project, but doesn't know Victor's methods. Why help me? You don't even know me." Jackson stopped walking, his young face etched with an earnestness that pierced Dominique's cynical defenses. "You were kind when you didn't have to be. Nobody's been kind since Mom died." The simple truth of a child cut through all complexity, a raw appeal to human decency. A crack of branches, someone approaching fast. Marcus appeared, breathless. "Dominique, they're here!" Black SUVs at both park entrances. Jackson's face drained of color, the terror returning. "Victor, there's another way out," Marcus said, his mind already working, "through the maintenance area. My cousin works here." As they hurried along hidden service paths, Jackson grabbed Dominique's arm. "I forgot to give you something." He pressed a small USB drive into her palm. "Mom's files. She was investigating Victor before she died. Dad doesn't know. Marcus led them to a service gate where his cousin waited with a maintenance cart. I can get the boy to the south entrance," the cousin offered. "Less likely they're watching there." Dominique faced an impossible choice. Stay with Jackson, increasing the risk for both, or separate to improve his chances of escape. "Go," she told him. "I'll make sure your father gets this." Jackson hesitated, then hugged her fiercely, a child's desperate plea for protection. "Be careful. Victor never loses." As the maintenance cart pulled away, Dominique and Marcus doubled back through the park's densest section. They'd nearly reached the west exit when Dominique's phone rang, an unknown number. "Miss Taylor?" Zoe Michael's voice, tense, urgent. "Where are you?" "Why?" "Because Chambers just accused you of kidnapping Jackson Harrington. There's an APB out for your arrest." Dominique froze, the ground shifting beneath her feet. "That's insane." "Jackson sought me out." "Doesn't matter," Zoe countered, her voice sharp with the realities of corporate power. "Chambers has police connections, and Hay Ellis isn't here to countermand him. Get somewhere safe. I'm working on reaching Ellis directly." Marcus led her to his cousin's apartment near Temple University, a safe haven, however temporary. There, they plugged in Jackson's USB drive. The files opened a stunning window into the Harrington Empire and Victoria Harrington's final investigation before her death. Victoria had discovered Chambers systematically isolating Ellis from operations, particularly the Urban Development Division. Projects approved for community benefit were twisted into predatory developments. Worse, Victoria had begun questioning the circumstances of earlier problem employees' departures, a chilling implication of foul play. The final file was dated 3 days before Victoria's accidental death. "This isn't just about real estate," Marcus whispered, his eyes wide with the gravity of their discovery. "This is corporate espionage, and possibly murder." Dominique's phone buzzed with a news alert. Harrington Industries announces surprise headquarters relocation to Chicago. Parkside development to begin immediately. Below the headline, a quote from Ellis Harrington praising the project, dated tomorrow. "They're accelerating everything," Marcus said, "but Ellis is still in Hong Kong." Dominique connected the dots. Chambers was making moves while Ellis was unreachable, creating situations that couldn't be undone once he returned. Another text from Zoe confirmed their theory. Ellis's flight diverted to LA. Mechanical issues. Chambers executing contingency plan. Stay hidden. Dominique's mother called next. Police had questioned her, searched her apartment, another victim of Chambers' ruthless tactics. The treatment deposit deadline had passed. The hospital was discharging her tomorrow. Every path forward seemed blocked, every hope extinguished. Then Dominique's phone chimed with a final text. This one from a different unknown number. "Miss Taylor, this is Ellis Harrington. We need to talk now." Attached was a private video call link. When Dominique connected, she found herself facing the actual Ellis Harrington, older and more weathered than his publicity photos, eyes sharp with intelligence and something else. Fear. "My son is missing again," he began without preamble, the weight of his global empire suddenly dwarfed by the personal crisis. "Zoe says you may know where he is, and that I should trust you. Mr. Harrington, there's something you need to see first." She shared her screen, displaying Victoria's files. Ellis's expression transformed as he absorbed his late wife's final investigation and the undeniable evidence of Chambers' betrayal. "Chambers told me Jackson was having another episode," Ellis said quietly, the words laced with profound regret. "That he'd run away from his therapeutic boarding school." "There is no school, is there?" Dominique asked, a rhetorical question. "No, sir. Jackson's been virtually imprisoned in your penthouse. Those episodes are escape attempts." Ellis's composure cracked, revealing the deeply personal pain beneath the corporate facade. "Where is my son now?" "Safe. Away from Chambers." She hesitated. "There's more about Reynolds' development and what's happening in Parkside." As she explained the forced tenant removals, the deliberate sabotage, Ellis's expression hardened, a steely resolve replacing his earlier fear. The Parkside project was supposed to be Victoria's legacy: affordable housing, community ownership. She grew up there. The revelation stunned Dominique. "You're from Parkside?" Victoria was. Met her when she waited tables at a diner to put herself through Wharton. His voice softened with the memory, a brief, poignant glimpse into their past. "I promised her we'd protect her neighborhood." A promise Chambers had systematically undermined, isolating Ellis from both his company and his son. "I'm landing in Philadelphia in 3 hours, Ellis said, his voice regaining its authority. "Zoe's arranging secure transport. Can you bring my son to meet me?" "Yes, but Chambers has reported me for kidnapping. Police are looking for me." Ellis's eyes flashed, a flicker of the old corporate titan. "I'll handle that immediately, Miss Taylor. Thank you for protecting Jackson when I failed to." After the call ended, Dominique sat in stunned silence. The simple meal she'd offered a hungry child had unraveled a conspiracy reaching to the highest levels of Harrington Industries. "What now?" Marcus asked, his voice low. "Now," she replied, a new resolve hardening her tone. "We get Jackson to his father, and hope Ellis Harrington keeps his promises better than he keeps his employees in check." Rain lashed against the windows of Marcus's cousin's apartment as Dominique paced the worn carpet. The plan seemed simple enough. Marcus would collect Jackson from his safe location and bring him to meet Ellis at a private airfield outside the city. Dominique, meanwhile, would deliver the complete evidence, the journal, the USB drive, and the photographs, to Ellis, ensuring Chambers' treachery was unequivocally exposed. Her phone buzzed with updates from Zoe. Ellis landing soon. Chambers still unaware. Then disaster struck in rapid succession, a grim symphony of chaos orchestrated by Chambers' ruthless efficiency. First, Marcus called in a panic. "Police just raided my aunt's house. They're checking all family properties. I can't get to Jackson." Before Dominique could fully process this devastating news, her mother's neighbor called, her voice trembling. "Police just took your mama to the station for questioning. They're saying you kidnapped some rich white boy." News alerts flooded her phone, her DMV photo plastered across local media. "Kidnapping suspect sought in Harrington Air disappearance." Dominique's vision blurred with tears of rage. How had Chambers orchestrated this so quickly, anticipating their every move? Her phone rang. "Zoe. Chambers knows Ellis is returning early. He's deployed private security to the airport. They'll intercept Ellis before he reaches the terminal." "Can't you warn him?" Dominique pleaded, her voice tinged with desperation. "Ellis isn't answering. Something's jamming communications with his plane. Another call, an unknown number." Dominique answered cautiously. Reynolds' smooth, unctuous voice oozed through the speaker. "Miss Taylor, such an unfortunate situation. Police searching for you. Your mother detained. Your reputation ruined. But there's a simple solution." "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice shaking with controlled fury. "The USB drive, the journal, your phone with those incriminating photos. Everything. Bring them to the Parkside Development Office in 1 hour. Come alone, and this all disappears. Your mother goes free, charges dropped, perhaps even a generous relocation package." And then the veiled threat, insidious and cruel. "And if I refuse, your mother's health is quite fragile, isn't it? Detention centers aren't known for their medical care." After hanging up, Dominique tried reaching Zoe again, straight to voicemail. She attempted Ellis's secure line, disconnected. Even Marcus wasn't answering. She was completely alone, facing a hydra-headed monster with no clear path forward. Rain soaked through her clothes as Dominique approached the Reynolds Development Office, a gleaming temporary structure on the site of 3 recently demolished historic homes, a stark monument to corporate avarice. Security cameras tracked her movement, cold, unblinking eyes. The door unlocked automatically, a chilling sense of inevitability. Inside, Reynolds sat behind a mahogany desk, Chambers standing at his shoulder, a silent, menacing presence. No sign of police. This was a private execution, a calculated silencing. "The evidence," Chambers demanded, his hand extended, devoid of any pretense of courtesy. Dominique placed her phone, the USB drive, and the journal on the desk. "Where's my mother?" Reynolds smiled thinly, a predator assessing its prey. "Being processed for release. Assuming everything checks out here." Chambers examined the USB drive first, connecting it to a laptop. His eyes narrowed, a flash of surprise. "The Victoria Harrington files. How did you get to these?" "Jackson gave them to me." "Impossible. Those files were deleted from our servers." "Victoria kept backups," Dominique replied, a small, defiant victory. She didn't trust you. Something dangerous flashed across Chambers' face, a hint of the true violence that simmered beneath his polished exterior. He turned to Reynolds. "We need to accelerate everything. Ellis lands in an hour." Reynolds nodded, then addressed Dominique, his voice dripping with condescension. "You've caused quite the inconvenience, Miss Taylor. Normally, we'd simply discredit you. Troublemaker, disgruntled employee, perhaps even mental health issues. But you've connected too many dots." "Where's Jackson?" she demanded, refusing to let their tactics distract her. "Safe," Chambers answered coldly. "Receiving appropriate supervision." The implication chilled her to the bone. "You're hurting a child to control his father's company." "I'm securing assets," Chambers corrected, his tone devoid of remorse. "Ellis Harrington is brilliant with markets, but sentimental about people. Victoria's death should have simplified things, but he became obsessed with her community projects. Jackson is merely leveraged to ensure cooperation." Reynolds interjected, impatient with the explanation. "Enough explanation. You have what you came for, Miss Taylor. Your mother will be released. You'll receive sufficient funds to relocate far away. Everyone wins, except Jackson, except my community." "Progress requires sacrifice," Reynolds dismissed, his words a hollow echo of historical injustices. "Sign the confidentiality agreement, and we're done." The document before her would silence her permanently. Her signature would betray Jackson, abandon her neighborhood, and surrender to the very forces destroying everything she cared about. Reynolds checked his watch impatiently. "Your mother's release paperwork awaits your signature." Chambers' phone buzzed. His expression darkened as he read the message. "Jackson's gone." "The safe house is empty," Reynolds cursed, a raw animal sound. "Find him now." As Chambers stormed out, Dominique realized her final leverage had vanished. Jackson was missing again, but this time she couldn't help him. "Decision time, Miss Taylor," Reynolds said, sliding the agreement closer. "Your signature, or your mother remains in custody while you face kidnapping charges." With trembling hands, Dominique picked up the pen, her mother's freedom against her own soul. No choice at all. Outside, lightning cracked across the sky as she signed her name. Reynolds smiled triumphantly, placing a check beside the document, her 30 pieces of silver. "Wise choice," he said. "Chambers will verify your mother's release. Then you'll be escorted to collect your belongings. Your bus ticket leaves tonight." Dominique stared at the signature, feeling something essential break inside her. All her fighting, all her sacrifice, ended with surrender. As she left the development office, rain washed away her tears, a futile cleansing. Her phone, wiped of all evidence, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your mother released." Charges dropped. Account credited with relocation funds. The system had won. Corrupt power had prevailed over simple justice. At her mother's apartment, she found the older woman asleep, exhausted from the ordeal. On the table sat her medication, the specialized treatment they couldn't afford before, with a note, "Courtesy of Reynolds Development." Treatment fully covered. The weight of her betrayal crushed down. They'd bought her silence with her mother's health, the one thing she couldn't refuse. Dominique packed a small bag, including her grandmother's photograph and the Santoku knife. The Singer sewing machine wouldn't fit. Another piece of her heritage abandoned. As night fell, she stood at the bus station, ticket to Atlanta in hand, a path to oblivion. Behind her, Parkside would fall to developers. Rosetta's diner would be demolished. Jackson would remain Chambers' prisoner, all because she'd surrendered. A bus pulled into the station, not hers, but headed downtown. Impulsively, she boarded it instead, needing one last look at the diner before leaving Philadelphia forever. Rosetta's stood dark and empty, closed signs hanging in windows. A construction notice announced demolition would begin tomorrow. Through the rain-streaked glass, Dominique could see the photographs still hanging on the walls, generations of black entrepreneurship and community, soon to be erased. Her phone buzzed with a final text. "Bus departed without you. Violating agreement already." Chambers. They were still watching, always watching. As she turned to leave, a small figure huddled in the alley beside the diner caught her attention. Jackson, soaked and shivering, his young face pale with fear. "They're looking everywhere for you," she whispered, pulling him into the shadow of the doorway. "Dad's plane landed," he said through chattering teeth, "but Victor's men took him somewhere." Not home. The final piece of Chambers' plan. Ellis Harrington would disappear until all contracts were signed, all properties demolished, all evidence eliminated, including witnesses. "I signed an agreement," Dominique admitted, the words a bitter taste. "I can't help any more." Jackson's eyes, so like his mother's, held no judgment. "You helped when it mattered. That's why I came back." In that moment, Dominique realized the true price of her surrender. Not just her community or her dignity, but this child's faith in the possibility of kindness without agenda. The rain intensified as a black SUV cruised slowly past the diner, searchlights sweeping the street. "We need to move," Dominique whispered, guiding Jackson deeper into the alley as the SUV circled back. "They're sweeping the neighborhood. We can't outrun them," Jackson said, his voice laced with the despair of a child who knew his captor's reach. "Victor has people everywhere." Dominique assessed their limited options. The tenant meeting location was compromised, Marcus unreachable. Every avenue of escape monitored. They needed a place Chambers wouldn't think to look, a blind spot in his network of control. "This way," she decided, leading Jackson through a maze of service alleys behind the commercial strip. They emerged at a dilapidated building with faded signage. Rose's Soul Food. Established 1952. "My grandmother's first restaurant," Dominique explained, retrieving a key from beneath a loose brick, a secret known only to family. "Closed 20 years ago, but family still owns the building." Inside, dust covered abandoned counters and tables, a ghost of a thriving past. Dominique secured the door and led Jackson to the back office, where she uncovered a landline phone, an antique in this digital age. "Who can we call?" Jackson asked, his voice a whisper in the gloom. "Victor monitors everything." "Not everything." Dominique dialed a number she'd memorized, a last resort, Zoe's personal line. No answer. She tried again. Nothing. Jackson pulled Victoria's phone from his pocket, a second device Chambers didn't know about. Mum always kept a backup. The display showed one saved contact. Emergency protocol. That's it, Dominique realized, a spark of inspiration. Your mother created contingencies in case something happened to her. When they called, a computerized voice answered, "Harrington security verification required." Jackson spoke clearly, his voice steady despite his fear. "Jackson Alexander Harrington. Authorization Bluebird." The line clicked. Verification accepted. Emergency protocol activated. Minutes later, the phone rang. Victoria's protocol triggered. a woman's voice stated. "This is Helen Morrison, Harrington Industries Board Secretary." "Who am I speaking with?" Dominique explained their situation rapidly, the words tumbling out. Helen's response was immediate. "The board meeting. It's happening now." Chambers convinced half the directors Ellis authorized the Chicago relocation. They're voting on the Parkside demolition as we speak. "Can you stop it?" Dominique asked, a desperate hope rising. "Not alone. But if Ellis or Jackson could appear at that meeting, a plan crystallized in Dominique's mind. Desperate, dangerous, but their only chance. "Where's the meeting?" "Harrington Tower, 44th floor, boardroom." And Ellis? Unknown. His plane landed, but he never reached the terminal. Dominique made a decision, fueled by a renewed sense of purpose. "We're going to that meeting." "Impossible," Helen countered. "The building's locked down." "Chambers has security everywhere." "Not everywhere," Dominique said, a grim smile touching her lips. "There's another way in." 40 minutes later, Dominique and Jackson crouched in the basement of a building adjacent to Harrington Tower. Marcus's cousin, the maintenance worker, had answered her desperate call, a quiet hero in their unfolding drama. "These utility tunnels connect most of the downtown buildings," he explained, illuminating a narrow passage with his flashlight. "Part of the original steam system from the 1920s, mostly forgotten now, except by maintenance workers," Dominique said, her voice echoing in the confined space. "And developers," he added grimly. "Reynolds wants these tunnels for his luxury condos, private access between buildings. That's why they need Rosetta's location so badly. It sits above a major junction. They navigated the claustrophobic tunnels, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and old concrete, eventually reaching a service elevator that accessed Harrington Tower. This comes up in the kitchen of the executive dining room," the cousin explained. 43rd floor. You'll need to find stairs to the boardroom from there." As they prepared to ascend, Jackson grabbed Dominique's hand, his small fingers surprisingly strong. "Why are you still helping me?" "You signed their agreement. They'll destroy everything you care about." Dominique smiled sadly. "Some things they can't take, no matter what papers I sign." The service elevator groaned upward, carrying them towards their destiny. On the 43rd floor, they found the executive kitchen deserted, the late hour their only advantage. A service stairwell, tucked away from public view, led to the 44th floor. Through the boardroom's glass walls, they could see the meeting in progress. Chambers stood at the head of the table, Reynolds beside him, a tableau of corporate power. Board members sat in tense discussion as documents circulated. "The final vote," Jackson whispered, his voice tight. "Once they approve, demolition starts at dawn." Dominique spotted Zoe, seated at the far end, subtly checking her watch, stalling for time. Helen Morrison, alert and perceptive, caught sight of them through the glass and imperceptibly nodded, a silent signal of acknowledgement and support. "Ready?" Dominique asked, her hand resting on Jackson's shoulder. Jackson squared his shoulders, a surprising strength emanating from the young boy. "Ready." They pushed through the doors. Conversation halted instantly. "Jackson." Chambers recovered first, his voice dripping with feigned solicitude. "Thank God you're safe. We've been searching everywhere." Reynolds's face drained of color upon seeing Dominique, his smug confidence replaced by sudden fear. "This woman is violating a binding confidentiality agreement. Security should remove her immediately." Zoe stood, her voice cutting through the tension. "I believe Jackson Harrington has right of access to any board meeting as a trust beneficiary." "The boy is emotionally disturbed," Chambers countered smoothly, attempting to regain control. Ms. Taylor has been exploiting his vulnerability. That's a lie, Jackson stated, his voice carrying surprising authority for a child. And I can prove it. He placed Victoria's phone on the table, a small device poised to shatter their carefully constructed deception. Play recording Alpha 6, he commanded. The phone activated, projecting a video onto the boardroom wall. Victoria Harrington appeared, elegant and determined, a ghost in the machine. If this recording plays, my safety protocols have been activated, she began, her voice calm and clear. Victor Chambers has been systematically undermining Harrington Industries' ethical commitments while isolating Ellis from operations. The board watched in stunned silence as Victoria methodically outlined Chambers' corruption, falsified reports, manipulated board minutes, environmental violations covered up. The Parkside development was meant to revitalize the neighborhood while preserving its cultural heritage, Victoria continued. Instead, Chambers partnered with Reynolds to convert it to luxury-only properties through forced displacement of current residents. Reynolds attempted to interrupt, a desperate last-ditch effort. This is preposterous. Silence, commanded an elderly board member, his voice resonating with authority. Let her speak. The recording continued, detailing the full extent of the corruption, a meticulous expose. As it concluded, Victoria's expression grew solemn. If you're seeing this, I may no longer be able to protect our company's integrity or my family. Please remember what Harrington Industries was meant to stand for. When the recording ended, the boardroom erupted in chaos. Chambers shouted over the din, "These are fabrications!" Ellis approved the revised Parkside plans. He signed the relocation order himself. Did I? A new voice cut through the noise, silencing the room instantly. Ellis Harrington stood in the doorway, suit rumpled, escorted by 2 FBI agents, the grand twist landing like a thunderclap. Dad! Jackson ran to his father, who embraced him fiercely, a raw display of paternal love. Victor Chambers and Maxwell Reynolds, one agent announced, his voice devoid of emotion. You're under federal investigation for wire fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy. Chambers lunged toward a side exit, a desperate attempt at escape. The second agent blocked his path. We also have questions about Victoria Harrington's accident. Ellis approached Dominique, still holding his son. Miss Taylor, it seems I owe you a debt I can never repay. How did you escape Chambers's men? She asked, still reeling from the sudden turn of events. Ellis smiled grimly. I didn't. They delivered me directly to federal agents. Seems Zoe had contacted them weeks ago with suspicions. They've been building a case, but needed Chambers to make a decisive move, to put all his cards on the table. Dominique turned to Zoe, who nodded confirmation, a silent acknowledgement of their long game. Victoria started the investigation. I finished it. As FBI agents led Chambers and Reynolds away in handcuffs, their empires crumbling, Ellis addressed the board. The vote on the Parkside development is indefinitely postponed, and we have significant amends to make. One director objected. The Chicago relocation contracts are signed. Demolition permits issued for tomorrow. Then we have work to do tonight, Ellis replied, his voice infused with a newfound resolve. Starting with this. He picked up Victoria's phone and activated another recording, this one showing Chambers practicing Ellis's signature, then applying it to documents while Ellis was overseas, a clear act of forgery and usurpation of authority. True power isn't measured by wealth accumulated, but by the dignity restored to those wrongfully harmed, Ellis stated, Victoria's principle clearly guiding his words. The evidence was irrefutable. The board unanimously voted to rescind all decisions made under false pretenses. As the meeting adjourned, Ellis turned to Dominique. "My wife believed in Parkside's renewal, one that lifted the community rather than displaced it. Will you help us honor her vision correctly this time?" Before she could answer, Dominique's phone buzzed with a news alert. "Breaking: FBI raids Reynolds Development. Parkside demolition halted." Justice had arrived with stunning swiftness. But for Dominique, the greater miracle was standing before her. A father reunited with his son because she'd once chosen kindness over protocol, compassion over convenience. 3 months later, Dominique stood in the gleaming kitchen of the renovated Rosetta's Diner, morning sunlight streaming through windows emblazoned with the original 1968 logo. The historic building had been restored rather than demolished, now serving as both a functioning restaurant and the headquarters for the Parkside Community Development Trust. She ran her fingers across the custom-built prep station, crafted from reclaimed wood from the neighborhood's oldest structures, a symbol of heritage preserved. Her grandmother's recipes, once prepared on a 2-burner stove in a cramped apartment, would now be served in a state-of-the-art kitchen under her direction as executive chef and co-owner, a dream realized. The bell above the door jingled. Ellis and Jackson Harrington entered. The boy, now healthier and more animated than the hungry child she'd fed months earlier, his eyes bright with a renewed spark. "Is it really happening today?" Jackson asked, excitement brightening his features. Dominique nodded. "Certificates arrived this morning. Everything's official." Ellis surveyed the space with satisfaction. Victoria would have loved this. Preservation with purpose. The past 3 months had transformed more than just the diner. After Chambers and Reynolds were indicted on multiple federal charges, Ellis had restructured Harrington Industries' approach to urban development, a profound shift in corporate ethics. The Parkside project was completely redesigned with community input, preserving historic structures while creating affordable housing and business opportunities for local residents, a genuine renaissance. Most surprisingly, Ellis had offered Dominique a partnership. The Harrington Foundation would provide capital to reopen Rosetta's under her management, with profits supporting culinary training programs for neighborhood youth, a cyclical model of empowerment. "Your mother's feeling better?" Ellis inquired. "Much better," Dominique confirmed. "The specialist you recommended worked miracles. She's talking about volunteering for the cooking classes once we launch." Her mother's treatment, fully covered now by the Harrington Employee Health Plan, had stabilized her condition dramatically, a tangible benefit of justice. The same plan that covered Dominique as the diner's co-owner. Outside, a small crowd gathered for the official reopening ceremony. Marcus stood among the tenant association members, all of whom had received favorable lease renewals, their homes secured. The housing attorney who'd helped organize their resistance was now heading the Parkside Preservation Committee, funded by Harrington Industries as part of their settlement with the city, a recognition of corporate responsibility. Aisha, rehired as the diner's first staff member, arranged fresh flowers on the counter. "Channel 6 is here," she called out, "and the mayor just arrived." Dominique straightened her chef's jacket, a gift from Ellis, custom-made by the same atelier that had served Philadelphia's finest restaurants for generations. Her name was embroidered above the heart, with a small silhouette of her grandmother's sewing machine underneath, a poignant connection across time. As she prepared to address the gathering, Dominique retrieved her final treasure from beneath the counter. Her grandmother's vintage santoku knife, now professionally restored and nestled in a hand-carved wooden case created by a local artisan. The third luxury item in her possession. But unlike the others, This one represented continuity rather than disruption, a tool for creation, not just survival. The ceremony proceeded with speeches from community leaders and Ellis, who spoke movingly about his late wife's vision for equitable development, a testament to her enduring influence. When Dominique's turn came, she kept her remarks simple, her voice clear and resonant. Rosetta believed feeding people was about more than filling stomachs, she said. It was about nourishing community. Today, we continue that tradition. The ribbon cutting was followed by a feast featuring Dominique's modern interpretations of her grandmother's soul food classics. Critics from Philadelphia's top publications sampled her cooking, including the sweet potato pie that had started everything. Later, as the celebration continued, Ellis drew Dominique aside. "There's something else," he said, presenting an envelope. The board insisted. Inside was a check, a portion of the settlement against Reynolds Development for discriminatory practices. The amount made her breath catch, a staggering sum. "This is too much," she protested, overwhelmed. "It's exactly right," Ellis countered, his gaze firm. "Justice isn't complete without restitution." Behind them, Jackson helped serve pie to elderly neighbors who shared stories about the original Rosetta. The boy who had once been isolated in a penthouse now thrived among people who treated him as simply himself, not an heir to billions, finding his place in the heart of a community. As evening approached, Dominique found a moment of solitude in the kitchen. She placed her grandmother's photograph in a place of honor above her workstation. The simple act of kindness that had started this journey, feeding a hungry child, had multiplied beyond imagination, creating ripples of positive change. Her phone chimed with a notification from the culinary school, where she'd once been unable to afford application fees. They wanted her to teach a master class. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is refusing to accept that kindness must be sacrificed for survival, she thought, understanding now what her grandmother had always known. Outside, the restored neon sign of Rosetta's Diner illuminated the street for the first time in years, a beacon in a neighborhood that would remain home to those who had built it. 1 year later, Dominique stood in the doorway of Rosetta's Diner, watching the graduation ceremony unfold in the community garden across the street. 20 students in chef's whites received their culinary certificates, the first graduating class of the Parkside Culinary Arts program she had established. The garden itself had been built on land once slated for luxury condominiums, a fertile ground for new growth. Now it supplied fresh produce to both the diner and the neighborhood's first farmers market, creating jobs and improving food access in what had once been designated a food desert, a vibrant testament to resilience. Jackson, now 12, had designed the garden's layout as part of his science project. He waved excitedly from beside a towering sunflower where he was explaining companion planting to a group of younger children, a natural leader. The boy who had once been kept isolated from the world was now thriving in it, spending afternoons at the diner, learning to cook, weekends with his father, and school days at Philadelphia's Public Arts Academy, a testament to Ellis's commitment. Ellis had kept his promises, not just to Dominique, but to the memory of Victoria. Harrington Industries had become a model for ethical urban development, with the Parkside project winning national awards for community-centered design, a paradigm shift in corporate responsibility. The tenant association had evolved into a neighborhood council with real power in development decisions, a true voice for the people. Dominique's mother now led a support group for lupus patients at the community health center, established in a restored Victorian that had nearly been demolished, another victory for preservation and care. As for Rosetta's, It had become more than a restaurant. 3 nights a week, it transformed into a classroom. Weekends featured pop-up spaces for neighborhood entrepreneurs, testing food business concepts, a hub of innovation. The vintage Singer sewing machine sat proudly in the front window, surrounded by photographs documenting the neighborhood's rich history, a bridge between past and future. The sweet potato pie that had once been an act of simple kindness had evolved into Dominique's signature dish, written up in national publications and even featured on a popular cooking show. But she still made it exactly as she had that rainy night, the recipe unchanged, the gesture of sharing it still meaningful. Chambers and Reynolds had been convicted on multiple charges, their sentencing a public acknowledgement that powerful men could no longer prey on vulnerable communities with impunity. The evidence from Victoria Harrington's hidden files had led to investigations of similar development schemes in cities across the country, sparking a wider reckoning. Dominique's phone buzzed with a text from her literary agent. The cookbook proposal had received another offer, this one including a television development deal. From feeding one hungry child to potentially teaching millions about the food traditions she had inherited, the journey still astonished her. As the graduation ceremony concluded, the students made their way to Rosetta's for the celebration dinner they had prepared themselves. Families filled the expanded dining room, the generations mixing easily in a space designed to welcome everyone. Dominique touched the small locket around her neck. Inside, a photograph of her grandmother alongside the newspaper clipping about the famous sweet potato pie. The inheritance she had feared losing had instead multiplied and evolved, a living legacy. When everyone had been served, Ellis raised his glass in a toast. To Rosetta's legacy, and to the power of unexpected kindness. The room filled with applause, but Dominique found herself watching Jackson, who was showing an elderly neighbor how to use the digital archive of community photographs he had helped create. The simple human connection across generations, across economic divides, was the real triumph. Have you ever experienced a moment when a small act of kindness, offered without expectation of return, changed everything? Maybe you were the giver, or perhaps the receiver. In a world that often rewards calculation over compassion, these moments remind us of our shared humanity. A meal offered, a hand extended, a child protected. These seemingly small gestures can ripple outward in ways we never anticipate, creating waves of change that restore dignity and rebuild communities.